Quizzy, Swizzy, and Mustache were just crowned the 2025 FNCS Global Champions, and it was all because of these insane strategies nobody has thought of. This trio managed to lock down the Hive for this season, which is widely regarded as the best drop spot on the map for multiple reasons. The first is obvious, and that's because it is home of one of the queen bugs. Right away when they drop in, they all find a gun and focus on killing the boss as soon as possible. This is so they don't have to worry about other teams coming in and shooting them or stealing the elimination on the boss, because it instantly gives your team B rank. On top of that, when eliminated, it drops the Surge Medallion, which gives players increased movement speed and a burst speed when sliding. Now this isn't actually super good in trios since only one player is able to use the ability, and we'll see why it is bad later on. However, it does play an important role in their game plan. Not only do they get the medallion, but they also get the mythic revolver and gold slurp juices, which play a very key role in their endgame strategy. Even though we're only a few minutes into the game, it's now where they start their plan that will set them up for the rest of the match. Most of you are aware that getting Storm Surge is the most important thing in an FNCS Grand Finals, especially on the global stage. It doesn't matter if you have the best loot in the world or not. If you don't have Surge, you will die. That's why recently this chapter, Surge bases and trading have become the meta for teams to get damage on each other. The way it works is very simple. Players will build massive structures like these, reaching out towards another POI, and from here they will trade damage with each other for as long as they can until they need to rotate. And while players do this, their teammates will typically refarm materials and gather up as many extra heals as they can, so the players getting damage can repeatedly do it without worrying about running out of heals. And this is where the medallion plays a big role, giving them an advantage early on. Queasy lets Swizzy and Mustache worry about getting the damage, since these two are considered the fighters on the team and Queasy the brains. And one of the reasons that makes the Hive so good is that it already has these natural massive structures, so all they have to do is just build off of them, giving them even more view on players that might be around them. But because of all these factors and the fact that Queasy can get all these materials and heals way quicker than any other team, it allows for them to all trade surge damage and get even more ahead of the lobby. Now this whole surge meta is obviously a big problem, but Epic is yet to address or do anything about it. So it's now come to, if you're not doing it, then you're going to be below surge, which typically results in you just sitting in the lobby. So this is what they and most other teams do in the early game. But what they do when it comes time to actually rotate is so much more different than any other team. Well, before we get into this, let's actually go back to the very beginning of the chapter to find out how they were able to claim the best drop on the map uncontested. Everyone knows that these players individually are insane, having a total combined earnings of over $2.4 million in 8 FNCS wins before coming together to play. But at the beginning of chapter 6, they decided to trio, and on paper, they were deemed easily one of, if not the best in Europe. However, their placements unfortunately were yet to prove that. Don't get me wrong, they played extremely well in FNCS, getting 4th, 5th, and 7th. However, most viewers expected a win from them by now. Everyone knows that Swizzy and Mustache are some of the best intelligent fighters in the game, and Queasy is one of, if not the best IGL, who loves going for height whenever possible. Unfortunately though, when it came time to play in Grands throughout this chapter, things just didn't go their way, and heading into LAN, nobody really knew if it finally would. However, each one of these players had something to prove. Swizzy was very unlucky the last 2 globals because he wasn't able to attend one, and then the other his teammate wasn't able to because of visa issues. Mustache would just sadly underperform, and Queasy would actually do extremely well. However, he wasn't quite able to win, after being so close, placing second twice on LAN. But after claiming the Hive right when the season came out, nobody really wanted to risk contesting them since they are still top dogs. And this spawn fight here can be very messy since there really aren't much structures to hide behind. Because of this, they were one of the favorites to take home the global title. But you really wouldn't think that after looking at their placements this season. During the divisional cups, they were all over the place, getting 23rd, 1st, and 9th. Now, obviously cash cups don't mean everything, however they are still a good indicator on how teams will play. But even giving the inconsistency, this is one of the most experienced trios in the world, and because of this experience is one of the reasons why they were able to master their mid game. When it's eventually time for them to rotate, they have really good surge from trading with teams around them, and since this drop has so much good loot, they are able to carry whatever items they please. However, their loadout choices might surprise you a bit. There's some obvious items like fizz, minis, chugs, and slurps. And for movement, they opt to have 2 stacks of crash pads, with Mustache and Queasy typically taking them. Then for the AR, they will take whatever the best AR around is. However, it's now where things get a bit strange. Instead of taking a pump, they all opt to carry a revolver instead. Now this isn't unusual, plenty of teams carry it because it can deal such high damage at range. But that being said, usually it's just 1 or maybe 2 players in a trio at most. Not every single one. However, the reason they do this will be explained very soon, and it plays a very important role. By the way, if you enjoyed the video so far, please double check that you're subscribed because not many of you are. Now this is what they decide to carry. However, there's one item they decide to deliberately drop which might surprise you. I mentioned earlier how the medallion might be super broken individually, however in trios it's not that good. For one, you move faster so you'll be ahead of your teammates, which is very risky and not ideal. But most damaging is that you are consistently being seen on the map to the rest of the lobby. Therefore, the benefits just don't outweigh the risks, so they decide to leave it. When it's time to go, they place a launch pad on top of the surge base, then fizz and launch pad. This combination allows them to go extremely far and pretty much anywhere they want, and it's very important for their interesting mid-game plan. So essentially, they will sit and trade surge until the zone is on them and the team that they are trading with decides to leave. After this, they will use the launch pad to go a few different directions depending on how the game is going. Now this drop has lots of loot like I've said time and time again, but it has literally zero metal. So because they've been mostly focusing on getting damage, they now have tons of it. So now they can shift their focus on getting this metal back, and they do this in one of two ways. The first, which they try to do most of the time, is go to an available bunker. Since they're one of the highest ranks in the lobby and most teams can't access it because they aren't A rank yet, a good amount of the time they're able to get it. And it really doesn't matter how far away it is. For example, in this game here, it is pretty much the furthest it could possibly be, yet they still go for it. Now you all know these bunkers are busted. It has insane loot, they're able to get an exotic, and a bunch of metal from it. From here, they are more stacked than anybody else in the lobby. And in order to get back in zone, they use a combination of the fizz launch pad or fizz crash pad. However, if a bunker isn't available for them, they will make their way to a POI that has lots of metal depending on where the zone pulls. Example of places they went during globals was OXR HQ, Swarmy Stash, and Resistance Base, amongst other POIs. Now throughout the rest of their mid game, they're constantly using fizz crash pads to put themselves more center into zone, being extremely careful not to get beamed or do dumb peeks for damage since they don't need any. These rotations from Queasy allow them to be in really dominant positions heading into later zones. And most of the time, since they are earlier than other teams, they're able to position themselves in spots where they can refarm their materials, so they're almost always capped. And since they mostly use movement when rotating, they still have tons of materials. And even though these rotates can seem a bit insignificant, this material saving is actually the reason for them being able to have their signature playstyle in Endgame. Speaking of Endgame, that's exactly where we're at. Now most of you know, Queasy's playstyle has always been to take height and win. He is known as the best IGL at this and has mastered it no matter what meta we're in. However, things didn't really go their way in game 1. During the later zones, they always try to position themselves on a more elevated part of the zone. Doing this gives them a chance to pull zone, and if they can do that, they easily have height for free. However, this doesn't work all the time. For instance, in match 1, zone pulls across the water max distance, and unfortunately, they just weren't able to take it. Now throughout the endgame, they repeatedly looked for opportunities to take it, but they just never had the perfect moment. So they opted to play a safe mid-ground layer, managing to get 4th right out the bat, which is a really good way to start off the tournament. Now given how this team plays, everyone knew that we were going to guarantee at least one win this weekend. But let's get a little less analytical here and show the absolute mayhem they put on the lobby the next 3 games.
And they have full control. And Rousey trying to play it. Directly assisting here. Bolt. Stats are the only ones that made it to the mountaintop. And Queasy is continuing to find its only blocker. And yet, Queasy and Verstat. It's a fellow gentleman, but Queasy, they're starting to drop. They're trying to see, but they can close this one out. Queasy finds the knot. He misses out. Queasy going for the back-to-back. Surprise attack. Lucky for him, his 2 teammates have his back. Verstappen gets the drop on Amarius. Stays alive. They're targeting out Vanya. 3v1 situation. And they go back to win another game.
So yeah, they went on to absolutely dominate the lobby, winning 3 matches in a row, having 12, 16, and 9 kills in each of them. So how exactly were they able to do this? Well, again, it's all because of height. Through every single one of their matches, they played out mid-game exactly as I previously said. They typically make their play for height during the ace zone. And what they like to do right when zone shows is that they instantly rotate forwards and crank up for height. Now sometimes they like to gamble and just crank up for height and hope they pull, however this doesn't work most of the time. But it's worth noting because when it does, they can save out on so many materials. Now obviously they aren't able to do these things every time, so sometimes they like to wait and sit back. Doing this and playing more patient, they're able to get damage on other teams going front side, which will most likely prevent them from going up. But it doesn't really matter, because after they finally see an opportunity where most teams have already gone forward, they go front side, typically using the Fizz and Crash Pad. Then they crank up and take it. Now it seems pretty basic, and well, that's because it is. They are aggressive for it. It's height or nothing pretty much for this team. And with the fighting caliber of this trio, if anybody does try to contest them, they're not scared to fight back. Now I'm talking about height so much here, but most of the games they actually weren't able to go for it, instead opting to play for a mid-ground layer. This is mainly because sometimes a team is just solidified on there and it's just not worth risking it. Other times they might have low mats, or they're just in such a good position already, it doesn't make sense risking their entire game to try to go for height. Now so far I've talked about how they obtain high ground, but how do they actually keep it? Well, it's really easy for them. Queasy makes sure to target front side, and he decides to go on the edge of zone so they have a more clear vision over the entire lobby. Doing this also gives them better angles to spray down at other players and makes it less likely that they're going to get beamed back. While he tarps, Swizzy and Mustache are applying as much pressure as possible, and this is where everyone holding revolvers comes into play. They're the only trio who does this, and it's because they know that they're going to go for height every game. These revolvers have crazy range, and since teams often use Crash Pads and Fizz in the open to rotate, they are able to get tons of free kills and damage they wouldn't otherwise be able to do with an AR or pump. Because they can get more eliminations, they drop down quickly and get refreshed on materials, making sure that they can continue to maintain height. And doing this allows them to connect and better establish it so they can't get chopped out. And it's this here that is the most important thing. Actually taking high ground is usually the easy part for them, especially with favorable zones. But being able to have constant awareness on teams around you to put pressure where is needed is a skill only the top pros have been able to master, and that's what makes them so insanely good on height. After day 1, they found themselves with an almost 200 point lead on second, and everybody thought they were going to win, but little did we know it was going to be much closer than anybody expected. Day 2, they really dropped the ball, and Queasy would take blame for this, saying his IGLing just wasn't super good. They kept finding themselves in bad spots, making them use a lot of materials and heals in mid game, which resulted in them going down early and game a few matches. Before they knew it, it was game 11 and the leaderboard was extremely close, with Pixie, Marius, and Vanyo right on their heels. However, they were about to take a page out of Peterbot's book and make sure they won. Queasy and Peterbot have actually worked a lot together and are very close. So this could have inspired him to do this, but during the match, they made it their goal to take down second place, even if it griefed the rest of their game. Pixie's trio drops OXR HQ, and this spot has multiple launch pads which they typically use with the Fizz to rotate in the zone when Storm gets on them. However, Queasy knew this. He has VOD reviewed other teams around him on the leaderboard to know exactly what their game plan is. So knowing this, they all camped nearby waiting for them to hit the pad.
OXR, they're waiting on top of the mountain. They want to rain down the shots as they fly through the sky. They crack the shields onto one. Queasy, Swizzy, they're trying to rotate in that direction. Finally, they get another opportunity, and it works. Vanya goes down.
Even though it was extremely close because using the Fizz and pad sends you at a render distance, Mustache was just barely able to get a knock on one of them. Now Pixie's trio managed to get the res, but now they were all boxed up super deep in zone with Queasy, Mustache, and Swizzy on their walls, making sure they were not going to leave. After 3 minutes of pretty much just staring at each other, it was time for them to actually fight.
Boxed up, Mustache has his head on a swivel, continuously turning around. Mataco talked about double pump, and there it is in action. Marius is able to get the knock onto one, but he gets dropped to 38 feet. They desperately need the siphon, but oh no! Disaster strikes! Pixie is now the last one alive! Mustache and Swizzy, they a miracle in the making as Pixie falls!
In the end, Queasy's trio would come out on top, taking them down. Now this put them in an awful position for the rest of the game, eventually going down to 16th. However, their mission to take down second was successful. With this play, it put them 50 points ahead of second. However, anything could still happen heading into the final game, and we were going to see if they would become the 2025 global champs. But without boring you, game 12 was not as intense as game 11. Instead of having an intense game where Pixie dropped on Queasy, both teams would decide to just play it out normally. And in the end, they would place 11th and 5th. Since Pixie's trio needed pretty much the win to stop Queasy, everybody knew who had won. Queasy, Swizzy, and Mustache had more than enough points and would be crowned the 2025 FNCS Global Champions. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to drop a like, subscribe, and check out some of these videos here. I hope you all have an amazing rest of your days. Peace out.